Alright, so a few people have been wondering, where did my gear go? You know, like where have I been, etc. I can at least answer one of those things. What I've been doing lately and where my gear went is I've actually made an alt account. And so I have one account just for mapping, and I'm gonna make like I've already made a Magic Find character, but I'll probably make another character just for fun and I'll map on that atlas. But then this character, right, this is where all my totem gear went onto this character, this account, which allows me to have two atlases, one for mapping, one for bossing. This is the bossing setup. Now, people have also been asking me about my version of the Totem Explode build. The TLDR, and what I've been recommending people play other variants, is because the big issue with this build is mana cost. Because you're throwing so many totems and the totems traps, which summon totems, which have such high mana costs, it ends up being between 500 and 1500 mana cost per second. And so you have to solve mana. So there's three ways you can do this. So the first way is you get the mana cost lower and you stack a bit of regen, maybe energy shield recharge, etc. The second method is you go slave drivers and you run them off your life. You can also use life tap, and then you just get a ton of life regen. And then the third method is you stack mana cost down to 0. Like you stack it all the way, 100% reduced mana cost. This version I consider to be the most advanced, the most expensive, although it's not even that expensive anymore because the other variants also got super expensive. But I consider this to be the best version by far because it means you can run any bat mods, you can run no regen, less regen, doesn't matter. And it also makes your blessing free, and you're not like costing life or mana. Like you don't care about your life regen is just for your life, right? Now, I'm not gonna go over the entire build or anything like that. I'll just go over like my variant specifically, my main difference. The first thing I wanted to mention is I started looking into this because slave drivers actually have a little bit of energy shield. And if you're familiar with the tech that I've been doing on the Impending Doom build and now this build, I am playing a not self-stun, but like I don't know what you would call this, but basically hits that stun you, heal you, and every hit that hits you stuns you. To go over this briefly, your stun threshold is based off your energy shield, and with 0 energy shield, every single hit in the game stuns you, and then hits that stun you recover your life, and then you also split the remaining damage into degen, which you then heal through recruit. A little bit complicated, not the point of the build exactly. But the main thing there is you want 0 energy shield. Having any energy shield actually breaks this because energy shield has an implicit 50% chance to avoid being stunned. So you don't want any energy shield, and what the slave drivers have, energy shield. And so immediately right off the bat, I knew I didn't want to run slave drivers. Even though they're kind of comfy, I immediately knew I wanted to stack 0 costs because I didn't want to run energy on my gloves. And so I ended up going for a rare pair of armor evasion gloves instead. So how do I actually do this? Well, this is why I don't recommend this setup. I am using a unique item that we actually designed, the Impossible Escape. There's 2 variants you can use. One is Glancing Blows, the other is Necromantic Aegis. And I am taking the Tireless Wheel, which stacks reduced costs. The other version, you would take Dreamer and reduce cost here, and then anoint Tireless. And I think I wrote down some calculations here. Yeah, right here. And so the first thing you get as a Pathfinder is reduced mana cost of skills. This scales with Flask Effect. And so you end up with something around 45% reduced cost from Flask. You then get another 10% from Mana Mastery, which I actually do not need, but you can take if your gear isn't exact, like if it's not like perfect, right? So you can get 10% here, you get another 18% from your jewelry with Fertile Catalyst. Fertile Catalyst give you an extra 1% reduced mana cost of skills. So you can see I've got 6% here, 6% here, 6% here. I also have 3% on my implicit. Again, this is why it's kind of hard to copy my build, right? But the key point I want to make here is I could get the Mana Mastery here. And there are other sources of reduced costs, essentially. You don't have to do exactly what I've done. There's like jewel mods. I think I have a jewel somewhere, but there's actually a rare jewel mod, reduced mana cost as well, and that also works. You get 10% from your anoint. Like I said, I anoint Dreamer. If you have the other Impossible Escape, you could anoint Tireless. And you don't, people have actually managed to get 0 cost without the Impossible Escape at all. But then you really need lots of jewels to make up for that. The last piece of the puzzle is the Timeless Jewel. So this jewel gives you reduced mana cost of skills per devotion. And with this tree, I have something like 100 or so devotion, giving me another 10%. You can actually get a few more points, like, or you could put it differently and path differently. Point is you get about 10%, maybe a bit more, from the Timeless Jewel. That gets you to 93, meaning you need 7% from somewhere else. In my case, I'm getting this from my Implicit and from my Impossible Escape, which you might not have, but the point, ultimately, again, the point I'm trying to make here is there are multiple ways to solve this puzzle. You just have to get to 100%. And so if you manage to achieve this, and again, this is like a pain in the ass, but if you manage to achieve this, you'll have 0 cost on your totem, on your blessing, on flame dash, on your everything, which means you can run no regen. You don't have to run it off your life, which means you're not constantly, you know, killing yourself through the life tap. It's just super worth it. It's just a pain in the ass. That's the main difference. Otherwise, it's a pretty stock standard totem setup. I can also talk about the latest upgrade to the build, and this is the thing that got me really excited. And this is why, in my opinion, Pathfinder is probably BIS, not just for this build, but for like all builds, like seriously. I did briefly mention the stun tech, right? So again, this essentially negates 60% of the damage you take, because every single hit stuns you, 60% of that damage immediately recovers. So effectively 60% of the damage you take just does nothing. What about that other 40%? Now, you might have previously seen me running a low life Petrified Blood setup. What this does is 40% of the damage you take, if I whip out the gem here for a second, when taking damage from hits, 40% of that damage is prevented, and then you take that damage as a damage over time effect over 4 seconds. You can actually mitigate this with Recoup, which is why you'll see Recoup on my rings and or my passive tree. There's a Recoup wheel here, and that allows you to negate that damage. What this means is 60% of the damage you heal instantly, 40% you heal through Recoup, meaning you take 0 damage. Any hit that hits you, like not degens essentially, any hit that hits you does 0 damage to you. But the new tech, well, it's not new, and I always talked about this, but I've dropped Petrified Blood for Progenesis. For those of you curious, this just means you don't need Petrified Blood anymore. That's all it means, right? So you can you drop Petrified Blood and you replace it with Progenesis. This gives you literally just double your HP. This doubles your HP. The reason this is so important is because hits that don't one-shot you, you're immortal against. And so with Petrified Blood, you do get one-shot a lot. Like really big hits one-shot you with Petrified Blood. With Progenesis, because I have twice the HP pool, it's way harder to get one-shot. So with this flask, I can literally, I can take like some absurd amount of damage. I'm talking like Maven Fireballs, Uber Exarch Balls, you know, Shaper Ball. I could already take Shaper Balls, but like very safely now I can take Shaper Balls. Like there's no way it one-shots me now. And yeah, honestly, this build it's just disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. If you use both, would it be more defense? Right, so no. The only reason you would run Petrified Blood on top is to go low life, which in my opinion, there's no reason to do so. It just makes you squishier. It's just not good. It doesn't stack additively, it's multiplicative, meaning that it doesn't, there's no need to do that to be immortal, essentially. Right, yeah, someone smarter than me decided to test the build. Maybe not smarter, maybe more persistent. Maybe just a scientist. We had a scientist test. You do still take some damage occasionally, like actual HP damage from getting hit. This is to do with Taste of Hate. I don't know why, I can't explain it. But if you do notice yourself taking a little bit of damage, like actual HP damage, assuming you've got the Recoup set up and everything's correct and you don't have any stun avoidance, like if you're doing everything correct and you're still taking damage, it's because of Taste of Hate. I don't know why, but yeah. You still run Taste of Hate though, it's too good not to run. If you could somehow get the Fizz damage taken, like maybe with a dual stat Watcher's Eye, you could consider dropping a Taste of Hate, and this would solve that problem. But honestly, I haven't died due to Taste of Hate since I swapped to Progenesis. The combination is just too strong, so. The flask is just 25% though. Right, I should mention briefly, this says 25%, but it scales the Flask Effect. And so with my current Flask Effect, it's 39 point something without Alchemist Genius, and with Alchemist Genius, it's a bit over 40, which is perfect. Doesn't need to be exactly 40, but it's, you know, as close to 40 as possible. Two more things. You don't need a 60% roll here. You can just not have 60% and you take some damage. It's not the end of the world. You know, taking 97% less damage effectively is still good. You know, that's fine. You have regen, so, you know, you're not gonna die if you don't have a 60% roll. 60% roll just means you can face tank like completely, but you know, that's fine if you don't have a 60% roll. But there is a little bit of cheat code here. You can anoint Unfaltering, and then you only need a 50% roll. The problem is you lose Dreamer Anoint, but remember what I said, there are multiple ways to get to 100% reduced. For example, I could then take the Mana Mastery and I would still have 100%. So you can just anoint Unfaltering, and that's fine. The second thing, Poison Chance. Now, worth pointing out, chance to poison or poison damage on a bow doesn't work. It's local, so this doesn't apply to the totem explosion. But things like the quiver and the glove implicit do. And so the benefit of not being slave drivers and using a bow is you get access to poison chance on your quiver, poison chance on your gloves, and then I have the Orc Wall, which gives me another 40%. You could also run this with Enhance, which is nice if you're running an Ashes. So you can literally get almost 100% chance to poison of this gem and an Ashes, right? So yeah, there are multiple solutions to get chance to poison. I went with the glove and the quiver. You could do Ashes with Divergent Herald of Agony, and you do have this one wheel on the tree, which is global chance to poison. There's also Curse Mastery for chance to poison, but because I don't have auto curse, I don't use this. But if you had gloves with, let's say you were using Asenaths, you could use this mastery to get your poison chance to 100. So there are multiple ways to get the poison chance. As far as why I'm not using Asenaths, I'll just briefly mention, I found the poison prolift to be better, like without the explosions. But you can totally use Asenaths. Just remember, you'll encounter that issue with Energy Shield. One cheat code here is to use Eldritch Battery on the tree. This will remove that 50% chance to avoid being stunned, but you'll still have the Energy Shield, which will prevent you from being stunned to like small hits. So I still prefer to have 0. And it also stops you from using the Evasion Mastery, which gives you extra spell suppression if you need it. But you know, the build's flexible. I wouldn't say this build is min-maxed by any means. Just because it's completely and utterly broken and it's the strongest build I've ever played in terms of a bossing character, doesn't mean it's min-maxed yet. You know, I'm not sure where people will take this build this league, but you know, I think we've seen Empyrean do some crazy stuff. People have been doing Ignite, people are doing Cold Conversion Pathfinder, Cold Conversion Trickster, Fire Conversion Chieftain. There's some Jug and Hardcore as well is very popular. There's some crazy stuff that people are going to do with this build. I don't know what the best build is. This is just my version, so. Okay, one more note. People seem to be confused about what the totem explosion is. It's a secondary damage source. So there's actually a wiki page for this, but all you need to know is it's not an attack, and it's not a spell, and it can leech. Think of it like DDD. You know how DD has the hit component from the spell, and it has a secondary area component from the corpse. So if you're familiar with DD, it's similar to that. And so it won't work with things like Serpentine Spellslinger because it's not a spell skill, right? It's not poison spell damage or anything like that. Yeah, it can't reflect either, which is fantastic. You can convert it and you can scale the damage, but not with things like spell damage or attack damage. So like, things like this won't work. Things like this won't work. But things like this will work. So. I think that's everything, right?